The memory of that night is etched into me, not like a photograph, but like a weather pattern that permanently changed the climate of my life. It was a rain that didn't just fall. It attacked the city with a cold, personal vengeance. I remember the sound of it, a relentless drumming against the windows of the bookstore, a sound that made the warm, cinnamon-scented air inside feel like a fragile illusion. When I finally turned the key in the lock and stepped out onto the street, the cold was a physical shock. It was the kind of wet, penetrating chill that makes you believe you will never be truly warm again. I pulled my coat collar up, a useless defense, and started the walk home, my head down against the stinging drops. The city was unnaturally quiet. The usual soundtrack of distant sirens and traffic was muffled, swallowed by the storm, leaving only the splash of my boots in growing puddles and the rush of water in the gutters. It was a silence that felt isolating, a reminder of how alone you can be, even surrounded by millions of people. I was halfway home, my thoughts already drifting toward a hot shower and a cup of tea, when I saw her. A figure huddled in the shallow recess of a doorway, beneath the scant protection of a closed pharmacy's awning. She was curled into a tight ball, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to make herself small against the elements. Just another piece of urban debris, something the city had chewed up and spat out, something most people, including me on any other night, would instinctively look past. But I didn't look past. My feet stopped of their own accord. It wasn't the pity that rooted me to the spot. It was a detail, a single impression that cut through the dismal scene. Even soaked and shivering, there was a defiant straightness to her posture. She wasn't slumped in defeat. She was coiled, like a spring. And then she looked up. Her eyes, a pale, clear gray, met mine. They weren't vacant or pleading. They were sharp, intelligent, and held a guardedness so profound it was like looking at a wild animal braced for a blow. In that instant, she wasn't a homeless woman. She was a person, a complete and complex universe of experience, and I was overwhelmed by a need to know her story. The words were out of my mouth before my brain could censor them. "Hey!" The sound was too loud, a human interruption in the storm's symphony. She didn't flinch or startle. She just watched me, her gaze steady and wary, waiting for the inevitable cruelty that kindness so often precedes. "I'm not going to call anyone," I added, softening my voice, trying to strip away any tone of authority or threat. You can't stay here. You'll freeze." Her reply was a hoarse whisper, barely audible over the rain. "I'm fine." "You're not," I said, and this time my voice held a firmness that surprised even me. My heart was hammering, a frantic, scared rhythm. This was against every rule I lived by. I was a planner, a cautious person who valued safety and routine. Talking to strangers in the dark in a downpour was the pinnacle of risk. But the feeling pulling me toward her was stronger than fear. It was a magnetic, irrational certainty. "I live just around the corner. Come and get warm. I'll make you something to eat." She stared at me, her expression one of pure, uncomprehending shock. "You don't know me," she said, as if stating a fundamental law of physics. "I know," I replied, the rain soaking through my hair and running down my neck. "But the offer stands." The silence that followed was one of the longest of my life. It was a tangible thing, stretched tight between us in the rainy alley. She was weighing me, my motives, the potential danger against the very real, immediate danger of the cold. I felt like I was being judged for my entire life's character in those few seconds. Then, with a slow, stiff movement that spoke of deep exhaustion, she pushed herself to her feet. I was struck by her height, and by the quiet dignity that remained in her stance, even in her drenched and desperate state. "Okay," she said. Just that single word. No name, no gratitude, no promises. I didn't ask for any. I simply nodded and turned, leading the way. The 2-block walk to my apartment was conducted in a heavy silence. I was acutely aware of her presence behind me, the sound of her wet footsteps a counterpoint to my own. I felt a bizarre mix of terror and protectiveness. I unlocked the door to my building and led her up the narrow creaking staircase to my second-floor apartment. When I pushed the door open, the warm, still air enveloped us, carrying the familiar, comforting sense of my life. Old books, lavender, and the faint, clean smell of laundry. In that moment, my cozy, cluttered home felt exposed, as if every knick-knack and bookshelf was being critically assessed. She hesitated on the doormat, dripping onto the floorboards. "You can take off your boots," I said, trying to sound normal, as if I brought soaking wet strangers home every day. I hung up my own coat, my movements awkward. "I'll get you a towel and some dry clothes." She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I fled to the linen closet, my hands trembling as I grabbed the thickest, softest towels I owned. I found an old pair of sweatpants and a hoodie, things that were soft and worn from use. When I returned, she had slowly, carefully removed her soaked jacket. What was underneath was worse. A thin black shirt clung to her skin, revealing the sharp, painful prominence of her collarbones and the alarming thinness of her arms. This wasn't just someone down on their luck. This was someone who had been systematically stripped down to the bone by life. Her silence felt heavy with unspoken trauma. I pointed her toward the bathroom and retreated to the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. What was I doing? Every sensible instinct screamed that this was a catastrophic error in judgment. I was alone in my home with a complete stranger, a woman who clearly had nothing left to lose. I should have been paralyzed with fear, but the predominant emotion wasn't fear. It was a profound, aching curiosity. I was drawn to her, to the mystery of her, and the feeling was as terrifying as it was compelling. She emerged 20 minutes later, transformed. Dressed in my oversized clothes, with her dark hair damp and towel dried, she looked younger and incredibly vulnerable. The street grime was gone, revealing pale, fine-featured skin. She moved stiffly, sitting at my small kitchen table as if it were a throne she wasn't sure she was allowed to occupy. I made tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, the most basic comfort food I knew. The steam rose between us, a temporary curtain. I told her my name was Meera. She stared at the food for a long time, as if suspecting it might vanish, before she said quietly, "It's Rye." She didn't offer a last name. I didn't ask for one. She ate with a slow, focused intensity that was heartbreaking to watch. It was the way someone eats when they're not sure where their next meal is coming from, savoring every bite, but also holding back, as if afraid to appear too hungry. I watched her, trying to read the story in her guarded eyes, in the way she held her body, always slightly tense, ready to flee. I asked her where she had been staying. "Here and there," she said, her voice flat, final. "Doesn't matter." I told her that it did matter, to me. That made her look up, and I saw a flicker of something in her gray eyes. Not gratitude, but surprise, as if I'd spoken in a forgotten language. Later, we sat with cups of tea. The storm still raged outside, but my apartment felt like a tiny, fragile island of calm. I asked her what made me stop for her, out of everyone. She asked me why her. I told her the truth, that she looked like she still had fight left in her, that maybe I needed a reminder of what that looked like. For the first time, I saw a crack in her formidable armor. A snort of disbelief, almost a laugh. It was a quiet, rough sound, but it changed the air in the room. She asked me what if she was dangerous. I asked her what if I was. That caught her off guard. She looked at me, really looked at me, and an unexpected faint smile touched her lips. In that moment, I knew that whatever this was, it had already begun, and there was no turning back. The days that followed were a strange, dreamlike suspension of my normal life. Rye was a quiet presence, a ghost in my home. She didn't speak much, but she didn't try to hide. She observed everything with those sharp, gray eyes. I found her standing in front of my bookcases, her fingers trailing over the spines of the books with a kind of reverence I'd never seen. She read for hours, curled in the armchair by the window, devouring words as if they were food and she was starving. I saw a deep, innate intelligence in her, a mind that had been stripped of everything except its own capacity to endure. I took her to the bookstore with me one day. She moved through the aisles like a visitor to a museum, touching nothing but seeing everything. She was hesitant, skittish when a regular customer came in, instinctively fading into the background. The world was still a threat to her, a place of potential danger. I saw the scars of a life lived on the edge, and they made my heart ache. I shared pieces of my own past with her, safer, softer heartbreaks, like the photographer who left me for a more chaotic life, trying to build a bridge of shared experience. She, in turn, offered fragments of her own story, a failed engagement, a sense of being too much, a life that had unraveled completely. She told me, in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, that I was the first person who had looked at her without disgust in a long time. The raw vulnerability in that confession shattered something inside me. The turning point came on a night when the power went out during a storm. We sat on the floor in the candlelight, and the darkness seemed to give her courage. She spoke about the relentless cold of the previous winter, about the moment she decided that survival, by any means necessary, was the only option. She confessed to things she was ashamed of, stealing, small deceptions, the things she had done to keep going. She believed they made her a monster. I listened, and when she was finished, I took her hand. I told her that they didn't make her a monster. They made her a survivor. There was a world of difference. She cried then, silent, shaking tears, and I held her hand in the flickering light, and I felt a shift in the universe. That night, she didn't sleep on the pull-out couch. She slept in my bed, just holding me. The trust in that gesture was the most profound gift I had ever received. We began to build a life then, a fragile, beautiful thing. I learned that she was funny, with a dry wit that could make me laugh unexpectedly. I learned she knew the names of constellations and could whistle complex melodies. She learned my routines, my silly fear of pigeons, my secret love for terrible romantic comedies. We grocery shopped together. We cooked together. We existed together in a bubble of newfound normalcy that felt anything but normal. But the past is a shadow that's hard to outrun. It lived in her nightmares, which would wake her shaking and breathless. I learned to hold her through them, to whisper reassurances until the tremors subsided. And it walked the streets in the form of a man from her old life, who recognized her and sneered that people like them don't get to keep nice things. That encounter shook her to her core. She came home to me, her hard-won peace shattered, terrified that he was right. I saw the fight in her eyes, the old instincts warring with the new life she was trying to build. And then she looked at me and she said, "I want this." She was choosing me. She was choosing us. It was a battle cry. Our life now is not a fairy tale. It is a conscious, daily choice. There are still nights when the ghosts find her. There are days when the weight of her history makes the air in our home feel heavy. But we are learning the geography of each other's scars. She helps me at the bookstore now. Her insights into people and stories are astonishingly perceptive. We are building something real, something sturdy, brick by brick. I found her in the rain, a soul drowning in darkness, and I offered her a hand. And in taking it, she didn't just save herself, she saved me too. She pulled me out of my safe, orderly world and showed me the fierce, messy, and beautiful truth of what it means to be alive, to be brave, to love someone not in spite of their past, but with a full acknowledgement of its weight. Our story isn't about a rescue. It's about two incomplete people who discovered that their broken pieces fit together perfectly, creating a whole that is stronger and more beautiful than anything we could have been alone. And this, I know with every fiber of my being, is only the beginning.